Hi everyone, and welcome to my discussion post for this module. Today, I'm going to be diving deep into the dynamics of organizational conflict and negotiation strategies. Conflict is inevitable. It's a part of human interaction, whether that be in personal relationships, cross-departmental workplace projects, or high-stakes corporate negotiations. However, not all conflicts are created equal, nor are the strategies we use to manage them. In this post, I will be addressing why why relationship conflicts are uniquely damaging compared to task or process conflicts, how power imbalances can dictate conflict management choices between equal versus unequal parties, a personal reflection on my own experience with conflict avoidance, and an analysis of integrative bargaining strategies. To understand why relationship conflict is so destructive, we first have to distinguish it from its two counterparts, task conflict and process conflict. Task conflict involves disagreements about the content or goals of the work, such as debating which marketing strategy will yield a higher return on investment. When managed constructively, moderate task conflict actually improves decision making because it forces teams to scrutinize assumptions and innovate. Process conflict centers on logistics, how the work gets done, who takes accountability, and how resources are allocated. While process conflict can cause friction if left unchecked, it is usually fixable by clarifying roles and workflows. Relationship conflict, on the other hand, is interpersonal friction aimed at personality, character, personal values, or ego. It isn't about what we are doing or how we are doing it, it is about who you are. This makes relationship conflict potential ground zero for the most dysfunctional and harmful outcomes. First, relationship conflict attacks an individual's self-esteem and personal identity. When someone feels personally criticized or disliked, the human brain perceives it as a direct threat. This triggers psychological defensiveness, causing ego to take center stage as the goal shifts from solving a shared problem to protecting one's personal dignity or defeating the other person. Furthermore, relationship conflict consumes an immense amount of mental energy. When team members are preoccupied with interpersonal animosity, distrust, or a subtle personal slight, their cognitive capacity is drained, information processing breaks down, and their work performance deteriorates. Finally, while you can resolve task and process conflicts with objective data, workflow charts, or logical analysis, relationship conflict is rooted in subjective perceptions and emotional baggage and lacking a logical anchor to easily reconcile. Now let us explore how these dynamics play out under the Thomas Kilmann conflict management model, depending on the power structure between the parties involved. When two parties have an asymmetric distribution of power, such as a manager and an employee, a board of directors and its CEO, or a large retail corporation and a small supplier, structural leverage dictates behavior. In these dynamics, the two most common conflict strategies to emerge are competing and accommodating. The more powerful party is far more likely to default to competing or forcing because they hold the formal authority, financial leverage, or administrative capital. They can impose their preferred solution unilaterally under a win-lose mindset. Conversely, the less powerful party is heavily incentivized to default to accommodating or avoiding, because confronting the dominant party carries an immense risk of job loss, maybe even a contract termination, or even retaliation. While this might look like a resolution on the surface, it frequently breeds suppressed resentment and silent compliance without a genuine commitment from your employees. So when two parties operate on a relatively equal footing, such as peer team members, similarly sized companies, or department heads, neither side possesses the absolute authority to force their will, nor do they feel compelled to silently yield. In these peer dynamics, the most likely strategies to emerge are compromising and collaborating. Compromising occurs frequently because equal peers realize that a total victory for one side is unlikely without a drawn out, costly battle. So both sides expect to give up something to get something in order to move forward. Collaborating becomes the ideal outcome among equals when the relationship and the long-term objective both matter deeply. Because peers must continue working together seamlessly, they have a strong mutual incentive to share underlying interests and construct innovative win-win solutions where both parties can fully achieve their goals. To kind of bring all of these theoretical models into a personal context, I want to reflect on a time I personally relied on conflict avoidance within a close friendship of mine. In this friendship, small friction points began to develop over time, but instead of addressing the issues directly when they were small, I repeatedly chose to sweep them under the rug, telling myself I was being mature, picking my battles, just keeping the peace. What I was actually avoiding by putting off this conflict was temporary personal discomfort. I avoided the awkwardness of an uncomfortable conversation, the vulnerability of expressing my feelings, and the immediate fear of an angry reaction. Being avoidant did not make the situation better in any way. By suppressing the issues, I allowed unexpressed grievances to fester silently. The underlying problem never disappeared. It transformed into invisible tension, emotional distance, and a passive resentment. Because the original issues were never resolved, a relatively minor trigger down the road caused an explosive blow-up within the friendship. The sheer volume of built-up frustration erupted all at once, taking the other person by surprise and creating tension that made the friendship irreparable. This experience taught me that avoidance is rarely conflict resolution. It is usually just conflict delayed with interest compounded. That being said, avoidance can be appropriate in specific strategic contexts, such as dealing with trivial issues when high emotional volatility requires a temporary cooling off period before engaging, or when you have zero leverage and immediate confrontation would cause catastrophic harm without any chance of a positive outcome. Finally, we're going to turn to integrative bargaining strategies, commonly referred to as principled negotiation. We look at methods that move away from zero sum, positional haggling towards creating shared value. Integrative bargaining relies heavily on four fundamental strategies. First, negotiators must separate the people from the problem. This requires removing personal ego, blame, and emotion from the negotiating table so that both sides can view each other as partners tackling a shared challenge rather than adversaries, preventing relationship conflict from sabotaging the outcome. Second, negotiators must focus on interest, not positions. A position is what a party demands, whereas interest is why they want it. When negotiators stop digging into rigid positions and instead disclose their underlying needs, they open up trade-offs that satisfy both parties. Third, parties must generate a variety of possibilities before deciding on a solution. Rather than rushing to a single compromise, integrative negotiation relies on joint brainstorming to expand the pie and invent options for mutual gain. Fourth and finally, negotiators must insist on using fair, objective standards. By grounding the agreement in external, verifiable criteria, such as market rates, industry standards, or legal precedents, both parties can feel confident that the outcome is legitimate, unbiased, and mutually beneficial. To wrap everything up, conflict in itself isn't good or bad. No one likes conflict, no one enjoys conflict, no one gets excited about the idea of conflict, but it does depend entirely on how it is categorized and managed. While relationship conflict can tear teams and personal connections apart, task and process conflicts handled through integrative, collaborative strategies can drive incredible innovation and make stronger relationships. Going through that rough patch, struggling with people can absolutely build a relationship and create a foundation for a strong working relationship. Understanding power dynamics and recognizing when we are using avoidance as an emotional crutch, and anchoring our negotiations in principled interest gives us the tools to navigate conflict effectively. I believe there are many tools out there to navigate and help us figure out how to productively cope with conflict. And in this day and age, we need to use that to our benefits, whether it comes to personal relationships, work relationships, or even, relationships online, in online schooling. There's many resources, many tools out there to help us. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to all of your thoughts.